that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you. Let's jump right into this. I'm going to make this statement and then I'm going to try to defend it. Jussie Smollet is the black homosexual Hillary Clinton. As many of you know, or most of you likely know, the charges against Jussie Smollet that were returned by a grand jury in the city of Chicago were all dropped. And not only that, his record was expunged. CBS News offered this explanation in a report on March 27th.
Chicago police and the mayor remain outraged after prosecutors abruptly dropped all charges against Jussie Smollett. The Empire actor was charged last month with 16 felony counts after allegedly staging a hate crime attack against himself. But all those charges have been dropped. Smollett maintains that he was a victim and that the charges against him were false. The city's mayor, Rahm Emanuel, called it a whitewash of justice, while Chicago's police union wants the Justice Department to step in and investigate. CBS News correspondent Adriana Diaz is following the story.
Mr. Smollet is still saying that he is innocent, still running down the Chicago Police Department. How dare him?
Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel could barely contain his outrage at the decision to drop charges against actor Jussie Smollett.
This sends an unambiguous message that there is no accountability, and that is wrong.
Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson says his department was blindsided.
It's Mr. Smollett who committed this hoax, period. If he wanted to clear his name, the way to do that was in a court of law so that everyone could see the evidence.
Smollett's attorney said his record was wiped clean of the 16 felony counts of disorderly conduct, each punishable by up to 3 years in prison. The actor remained unapologetic while maintaining his innocence.
I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one.
Prosecutors accused Smollet of lying to police about being attacked in the middle of the night by two white men who shouted racist and homophobic slurs. But it was these two brothers who admitted under oath that Smollet paid them to do it.
I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I've been accused of.
Investigators have said the 36-year-old, who's openly gay, made the report to get publicity in hopes of gaining a larger salary on the TV drama Empire. State prosecutor Joe Magatz is the person who made the decision to drop the charges. He believes Smollett made up the allegations, but says the nonviolent case qualifies for community service and a financial penalty, which he says is common practice.
So you believe he's guilty?
Yes.
So why drop the charges?
Our priority is violent crimes and the drivers of violence. Jussie Smollett is neither one of those.
And is community service and $10,000 enough to wipe this clean?
I feel that it is.
CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman calls the latest twist beyond unusual.
You would think that you would have restitution here. You would admit guilt. You would do an apology to the entire city of Chicago. None of that happened here.
Lawyers for the city of Chicago are now trying to determine if they can legally release evidence in the investigation, despite the judge sealing the case. Adriana Diaz, CBS News, Chicago.
And Jussie Weber joins me now on set. He's an attorney and host of the Law and Crime Network. So, prosecution pushed forward the reason that he's a first-time nonviolent offender and got these charges dropped. Is that normal?
Then why did they present it to a grand jury to move forward with the trial? They should have had this determination weeks ago. Something doesn't make sense. You don't have charges dropped. They're dropped for one of three reasons. Either one, there's some bombshell exonerating evidence clearing him. That's clearly not the case. Two, they felt there was insufficient evidence after reviewing everything to proceed and that they'll win at a trial. That doesn't seem likely in light of everything that we know, and the Chicago Police Department says that they have more evidence coming forward than was made public. Or C, there was some deal made that no one can explain 24 hours later, and I think that's where we're at right now.
Because it's a little strange. You know, Smollett's attorney asked for the case to be sealed. The prosecution didn't seem to fight it. That was sealed. But do you think potentially we may never know if there was a deal and what happened?
See, the thing is he had a right to have it sealed. The question is, why was it sealed? You know, a lot of times when we talk about the Mueller case, a lot of information was sealed and not made public because we were thinking maybe there's incriminating information about other people that they might indict at a later point. Maybe there's information that can't be made disclosed to the public. Here it seems to be that they don't want it to get out because something doesn't make sense. And unless he were to file a lawsuit against the Chicago Police Department or the state attorney's office saying that they improperly investigated him, charged him, where if the litigation happened, then all of that information can come forward, there's a strong possibility we'll really have no idea exactly what happened.
I want to go back to something that the prosecutor who dropped the charges indicated. He said that the priority for his office is violent crime in Chicago. Then please explain to me how the murder clearance rate, the homicide clearance rate in Chicago, and Chicago is nationally renowned for the shootings and murders that occur within it. How come you solve fewer than 20% of those cases? How is that? This from, what is this? WBEZ 91.5 Chicago. This was from January of 2017, 19.8%. And that was down from 25.4% in 2015. Fewer than 1 in 5 cases even get solved, but this is your priority? Oh, that was a few years ago. I got you. But back in last year, in 2018, 3 weeks after 75 people were shot in Chicago's most violent weekend, only one shooter had been charged. One arrest? Your priority is, come on, man. And as you heard, Jussie Smollett is still lying. Still lying. People have come out, and the interesting thing to me is the prosecutor, well, yeah, he's guilty, but you're not going to try him? You're not going to at least get him to plea bargain? You're going to allow a judge to seal the case? Why? Why? And that question has yet to be answered to the satisfaction of the mayor and the superintendent of police in the city of Chicago. They had this reaction in a press conference the day it was announced that the charges would be dropped.
So listen, I'm sure we all know what occurred this morning. My personal opinion is that you all know where I stand on this. Do I think justice was served? No. Where do I think justice is? I think this city is still owed an apology. And let me digress for a moment. When I came on this job, I've been a cop now for about 31 years. When I came on this job, I came on with my honor, my integrity, and my reputation. If someone accused me of doing anything that would circumvent that, then I would want my day in court, period, to clear my name. I've heard that they wanted their day in court with TV cameras so America could know the truth, but no, they chose to hide behind secrecy and broker a deal to circumvent the judicial system. My job as a police officer is to investigate an incident, gather evidence, gather the facts, and present them to the state's attorney. That's what we did. I stand behind the detective's investigation. I'll let Mayor Emanuel comment further.
One thing is not only do I support the hard work of our police officers, the defective units, but I'd like to remind everybody a grand jury indicted this individual based on only a piece of the evidence that the police had collected in that period of time. So a grand jury actually brought the charges. I think on three things I'd like to say. One, on financial costs, this $10,000 doesn't even come close to what the city spent in resources to actually look over the camera, gather all the data, gather all the information that actually brought the indictment by the grand jury on multiple different charges. Second is what I would call the ethical costs. And the ethical cost is you have, as a person who was in the House of Representatives when we tried to pass the Shepard legislation that dealt with hate crimes, putting them on the books, that President Obama then signed into law, to then use those very laws and the principles and values behind the Matthew Shepard hate crimes legislation to self-promote your career is a cost that comes to all the individuals, gay men and women, who will come forward and one day say they were a victim of a hate crime who now will be doubted. People of faith, Muslim or any other religious faith, who will be a victim of hate crimes. People that of all walks of life and backgrounds, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Now this casts a shadow of whether they're telling the truth, and he did this all in the name of self-promotion. And he used the laws of the hate crime legislation that all of us collectively over years have put on the books to stand up to be the values that embody what we believe in. This is a whitewash of justice.
A whitewash of justice, indeed. But again, Chicago, let's be clear about something. Everything that Superintendent Johnson and Mayor Emanuel said in their comments expressing their outrage, they're absolutely correct. But at least in the case of Rahm Emanuel, man, you are a hypocrite of the first order. Because not only do you have issues on this topic, but you're not known as the most non-corrupt individual. So we have to take some of that with a grain of salt. But the simple truth is this. Jussie Smollet lied. Jussie Smollet was caught in a lie. The evidence supporting that he lied is voluminous. And only a portion of that was used to get 16 counts against him returned by a grand jury. So if the prosecutor had problems with the evidence and you heard the prosecutor say, yeah, I think he's guilty, why are you going to let somebody walk on 16 felony counts? What kind of message are you sending? And to try to say that this is about, we need to focus on violent crimes, you mean the violent crimes you're not solving? Are you really focusing there? Seriously? Not sure about that. And now let's come to how I get Hillary Clinton out of this. Because if you remember the whole thing about emails and classified information and all the lies that Hillary told, in the same way that Jussie Smollett told them, and those lies were exposed.
I did not email any classified material to anyone. There is no classified material. 110 emails in 52 email chains have been determined by the owning agency to contain classified information at the time they were sent or received. I provided all my emails that could possibly be work-related. Several thousand work-related emails that were not among the group of 30,000 emails returned by Secretary Clinton. I thought using one device would be simpler. She also used numerous mobile devices to send and to read email. There were no security breaches. It is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email account. It was my practice to communicate with State Department and other government officials on their .gov accounts. Hostile actors gained access to the private commercial email accounts of people with whom Secretary Clinton was in regular contact from her personal account. No doubt that we've done exactly what we should have done. They were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. People will be able to judge for themselves. We cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. To be clear, this is not to suggest that in similar circumstances, a person who engaged in this activity would face no consequences. Americans will find that, interesting, and I look forward to having a discussion about that.
Well, quite frankly, we never did have that discussion, did we? And doesn't that sound familiar? You looked and saw the evidence Everything was there, and the idea that we can't move forward with what's going on here, how do you get there? And, of course, that was former FBI Director James Comey, who I think it was in July of 2016, just ripped Hillary Clinton, basically indicted her, went count by count, line by line, incident by incident, and then, of course, at the end he said, well, I don't think we have enough evidence that any reasonable prosecutor would want to move forward with, which was ridiculous. So, and let me summarize that, because that first clip was basically showing how ridiculous the Hillary Clinton lies were in the face of the FBI investigation that followed. But here is Mr. Comey making it very clear that there's plenty of evidence, but there's just no will to move forward.
Although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. For example, 7 email chains concern matters that were classified at the top secret special access program at the time they were sent and received. Those chains involve Secretary Clinton both sending emails about those matters and receiving emails about those same matters. There is evidence to support a conclusion that any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position or in the position of those with whom she was corresponding about those matters should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
And people with less sensitive positions than the one Hillary Clinton held, military personnel, have been jailed for doing less than what Hillary Clinton did. So this makes Jussie Smollet the black homosexual Hillary Clinton. He did it. We all know he did it. And those who investigate the crimes are also convinced that a crime was committed. But we're not going to move forward on it. Why? Because Jussie Smollett is a progressive. Let me help you out. You don't see hardly any, if any at all, incidences where someone who leans right of center politically gets this kind of rhythm from the justice system. Wait a minute. We got 16 felony indictments against you. Tell you what, you really screwed up, son. I want $10,000 from you. Now remember, he makes like $20,000 an episode. I think he did that 5 years ago. It's probably up in I don't know what it is now. So basically half an episode of money, which still left him with $10,000. Really? We're going to take $10,000 from you, which really doesn't hurt. And we're going to recognize that you're going to do community service. And you're going to walk away from 16 felonies. Oh, by the way, on top of that, we're going to seal the case so that nobody can look at all of the evidence that the Chicago Police Department gathered. Let me ask you a question. Has anybody seen all of the evidence that the FBI gathered regarding Hillary Clinton after they announced that they were not going to move forward by referring charges to the Department of Justice? Anybody remember seeing any evidence after that? So what's the difference? Hillary Clinton violated national security egregiously, consistently, almost constantly during her time as Secretary of State. The evidence is out there. No one had to look hard to find it. They could demonstrate the potential harm done. And not only did she have no accountability, she was allowed to go on and compete for the highest office in the land. Thank goodness the American people said no. But no one's here to protect the American people, or even the people of Chicago, from Jussie Smollett. Another progressive, another Trump hater, another person who is not down with the will of the American people. All these things that you can say about Jussie Smollett, you can also say about Hillary Clinton and vice versa, is caught red-handed committing a heinous violation of public trust. But there's not going to be any consequence. Hillary Clinton has never been indicted. Hillary Clinton's never been charged. And all the evidence against her has kind of evaporated. It's out there, but it's not going anyplace. Just like with Jussie Smollett. If you're not understanding that in this country right now, there is no accountability for political actors on the left, then you really don't understand what is going on. There's not going to be accountability, legal accountability, ethical accountability, moral accountability. The only way that it's going to come in this country at this time is through the ballot box, which is the last place that you should have to be doing this if you have a legal system. But the legal system does not do anything with respect to progressives. It is what it is, guys. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330, and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, it's about time, but somebody finally looked at Joe Biden, the political emperor, and said the emperor has no clothes. After years of shenanigans on the part of Joe Biden, who has never been correct about anything in D.C. in his entire political career, well, somebody finally got him on something that is intuitively obvious to the casual observer.
Now to the accusation of inappropriate touching involving former Vice President Joe Biden. A Democratic candidate for political office in Nevada says an endorsement took an invasive turn and that she felt powerless to stop it. Here's ABC's Stephanie Ramos.
Tonight, Joe Biden is facing troubling accusations. Nevada Democrat Lucy Flores claims the former vice president inappropriately touched and kissed her head before a rally in 2014. She writes in New York Magazine that she felt powerless to do anything about it. Biden had attended the rally to help boost her campaign for lieutenant governor. Flores goes on to claim that moments before she took the stage, she felt the vice president get close to her from behind, lean in, and, quote, inhale her hair. She writes, he proceeded to plant a big slow kiss on the back of my head. My brain couldn't process what was happening. I was embarrassed. I was shocked. I was confused. He made me feel uneasy, gross. In a statement to ABC News, Biden's spokesperson says neither the vice president nor his staff recall what Flores describes or got the impression she had been uncomfortable. Vice President Biden believes that Ms. Flores has every right to share her own recollection and reflections, and that it is a change for better in our society that she has the opportunity to do so. This isn't the first time Biden has come under scrutiny for his behavior around women. In 2015, Biden put his hands on Stephanie Carter's shoulders, whispering in her ear during her husband's swearing in as Secretary of Defense. The Flores allegations come as Biden considers a possible run for president. Other contenders reacting to the new claims.
I believe Lucy Flores, and Joe Biden needs to give an answer.
Stephanie Ramos joining us now from Washington, and all of these candidates under heavy scrutiny. Some of Vice President Biden's former staffers are now coming to his defense tonight.
That's exactly right, Whit. Several staffers, including women, are coming to Biden's defense. One former staffer tweeted today that she never felt uncomfortable with how he treated her or other women. She also says Biden has dedicated his career to women's empowerment, and that's one reason why she worked for him. Whit.
Stephanie, thank you.
You're kidding, right? Stephanie Flores, don't get me wrong, but I'm flabbergasted when I listen to Democrats talk about believe women, and at the same time they haven't condemned Joe Biden. I just find that fascinating. And then, of course, there is Joe Biden's office coming out with the statement that I don't even know what they're talking about.
Even before deciding whether to run for president, Joe Biden is making headlines, but not for the right reasons. A former Nevada politician is accusing the former vice president of touching her inappropriately. Lucy Flores says Biden made her feel, quote, uneasy, gross, and confused by kissing her on the back of her head. Flores wrote about her allegations in an essay for The Cut, an arm of New York Magazine, saying the alleged incident happened at a side stage as she was preparing to give a speech at a campaign rally in 2014, adding at the time she was the Democratic nominee for the lieutenant governor of Nevada. Democratic presidential hopefuls reacting to the latest allegations.
I believe Lucy Flores, and Joe Biden needs to give an answer.
I believe Lucy Flores. I believe that the vice president put a statement out today on that, we need to live in a nation where people can hear her truth.
Biden's spokesperson released a statement saying he does not recall the incident, adding in part, quote, neither then nor in the years since did he or the staff with him at the time have an inkling that Ms. Flores had been at any time uncomfortable, nor do they recall what she describes. Meanwhile, other Democratic presidential nominees are out with voters. Beto O'Rourke officially kicking off his grassroots campaign in his hometown of El Paso.
This state and its 38 electoral votes count like they've never counted before.
Also, Tulsi Gabbard made a stop in Los Angeles, while Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar were in Iowa. And Joe Biden is expected to announce his decision to run for president in the next few weeks. In El Paso, Texas, Claudia Cowan, Fox News.
Okay, this is too good. I love listening to the repeat of the Elizabeth Warren. I believe Lucy Flores, and then you have Castro, I believe his name is, coming in. I believe Lucy Flores, and wait a minute. Let me get this straight. When you decided to believe the liar formerly known as Christine Blasey Ford, then a man who had already been investigated 6 times by the FBI was supposed to step down. He was supposed to walk away from the nomination to be a Supreme Court justice because you believed the woman. So he was supposed to step down. So let me get this straight. If you believe Lucy Flores, then why are you not saying that Joe Biden has no place in the presidential race? Why are you not saying that Joe Biden should apologize and should abandon any hope of seeking the nomination for president of the United States? Why are you not saying that? Well, are we saying there's a double standard? Or are you saying you really don't believe Lucy Flores? Well, we need to hear her truth. Well, this is the same guy in the same statement. The vice president has put a statement out about that. Wait a minute. If you believe Lucy Flores, what difference does it make what statement Joe Biden put out? Particularly when he says, I don't recall. I'm sorry. You know what? Let's just be honest about this. If there isn't one already, you could put together a YouTube channel of all of the stuff Joe Biden has done to women and girls. And this is not clandestine. This is not covert. This is in the open in front of news cameras. The dude he's an old pervert. That's all there is to it. And the idea that he should be allowed to get away with this is the same, of course, he's of roughly the same generation as George H.W. Bush, who in his later years was just going around grabbing folks' backsides, women, that is. And to the point where even Barbara Bush was saying, man, he's going to get himself in trouble. And I hear Joe has not met a woman, bottom line, 8 years old to 80, blind, crippled, or crazy. He doesn't care. He's going to put hands on folks. Vox.com put together a little video, and I have the audio for it, just going through some, and I do mean some, of Joe Biden's history with women. It is fascinating that people aren't picking up on this.
Democrat Lucy Flores was preparing to give one of her final stump speeches in a race for lieutenant governor in Nevada when she felt two hands on her shoulders. Why is the Vice President of the United States touching me? Flores wondered. Flores recounts her experience with Joe Biden in a first-person essay for New York Magazine, describing an incident in 2014 where Biden came up behind her, leaned in, smelled her hair, and kissed the back of her head. Biden was the second most powerful man in the country and arguably one of the most powerful men in the world. He was there to promote me as the right person for the lieutenant governor job. Instead, he made me feel uneasy, gross, and confused. New York Magazine reached out to a Biden spokesperson who declined to comment. Flores' experience isn't unique. It is no secret in Washington that Biden has touched numerous women inappropriately in public. It's just never been treated as a serious issue by the mainstream press. Biden's been caught on camera embracing a female reporter from behind and gripping her above her waist, just below her bust. At a swearing-in ceremony for Defense Secretary Ash Carter, Biden put his hands on the shoulders of Stephanie Carter, Carter's wife, and then leaned in and whispered into her ear. He's whispered into many women's ears. He's also touched women's faces and necks during other photo ops. Once at a swearing-in ceremony for a U.S. senator, he held the upper arm of the senator's preteen daughter, leaned down and whispered into her ear as she became visibly uncomfortable. Then he kissed the side of her forehead, a gesture that made the girl flinch. It's all out in the open. News outlets wrote about these incidents. But the stories ran under light-hearted headlines like, "Photo of famously friendly Joe Biden goes viral," or "Here's Joe Biden being Joe Biden with Ash Carter's wife," or "Joe Biden, sex symbol, a piece that I edited and now regret." Ideological media outlets did write some critical pieces during the Obama era. At The Federalist, Molly Hemingway questioned whether liberals would tolerate the same conduct from a conservative. At Talking Points Memo, Alana Levinson criticized liberals for giving him a pass. But overall, Biden got a pass from the political media. Reporters now would look twice at a new politician who is handsy on camera. They'd ask questions about it and likely look into his private conduct. And women like Flores are taking big risks and speaking out. Biden avoided scrutiny in the past, but if he wants to be the next president, he'll face pressure to account for his actions. The Onion satirized Biden in 2009 in a viral article that cemented Biden's image of a lovable everyman. Real Biden remembers his working-class Scranton roots. Onion Biden washes his Trans Am on the White House lawn. Real Biden is handsy with women. Onion Biden is a womanizer. "Hey, hot stuff, looking good, Onion," Biden told a passing aide. "Would you know where I could get a little bucket and sponge action? My mean machine needs to be cleaned." The images bled together over the years into the persona of Uncle Joe. When he dropped an F-bomb on a live mic, it was a classic Joe moment. When he made one of his many gaffes, it got added to numerous lists written in good fun. And when he did kind of creepy things to women at public events, well, that was just Joe being Joe, too. All of those frames made appealing pitches just a few years ago. Editors would be happy to get a lovable Uncle Joe strikes again story. The environment is not the same now. Certainly the media is not nearly perfect when it comes to covering gender and power. But in the era of #MeToo, there is far less appetite for a story that makes light of a candidate behaving badly toward women. As Flores writes, this conduct matters. I'm not suggesting that Biden broke any laws, but the transgressions that society deems minor or doesn't even see as transgressions often feel considerable to the person on the receiving end.
This, to me, is hilarious. Now, let me just say this so we would know. I don't really trust Lucy Flores. I'm not saying I disbelieve her recollection, because Joe Biden has a history. Let's just be honest. Joe Biden has a history that you can find on YouTube. You can find in news video. He is all over all kinds of women and girls. That's just what he is. But let's not forget that the lieutenant governor race in Nevada, for which Lucy Flores was the Democrat candidate, she got the brakes beat off of her, 60% to 34%. Here is my statement on that. Had she won that race, we wouldn't be hearing about this. Let's just be honest. She didn't have anything to say. This is 2019. She didn't have anything to say for 4.5 years, going on 5 years. Seriously? And now all of a sudden we need to bring it up? I repeat, had she won that 2014 race for lieutenant governor of the state of Nevada, she would have nothing to say about Joe Biden except what every other Democrat wants to say about Joe Biden, which is, oh, that's just Joe being Joe. Amazing. Look, Joe Biden's a menace. He's an idiot. He's never been right about anything. And how he ever got elected in the first place, you know what? I don't live in Delaware. And if I did, I would never have voted for that clown. Never. Under any circumstances. And now all of a sudden, of all the things that he has done on camera, this thing, which apparently wasn't caught on camera, he has no recollection. I'm sorry. He has no recollection. And of course, there are people out there who want to do the black angle who say, well, you got to remember how he treated Anita Hill back during the Clarence Thomas. Let me make this clear. I don't give a rat's behind how anybody treats the liar Anita Hill. If you don't want to be treated badly, don't lie. That's it. Just don't tell that bald-faced lie, and you would have never gotten treated badly on Capitol Hill by Joe Biden or anybody else. If Joe Biden is actually a serious contender for the Democrat Party nomination for president in 2020, then you might as well give everybody a MAGA hat and move on. He is an idiot. He is a sexual predator idiot. No matter how fun and frivolous you may think it is, that's what he is. And he has no policy prescriptions of his own. He is a left-leaning political weather vane. Wherever the progressive wind blows, you will find him pointing in that direction. Now, you finally have somebody saying, Joe Biden ain't all that. Joe Biden has a problem keeping his hands off women. Something everybody knows, but now somebody has finally said it. Yeah, the emperor has no clothes. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of this first hour. Of course Trump would shut down the border. I got to admit, I'm kind of surprised that people are even discussing this as anything other than a near certainty. Not that he absolutely will do it, but basically, if he does not see what he believes he should see, that he would even think twice about doing. Of course, he'll shut down the border. This goes back all the way, at least until October, when Bloomberg had this report on Trump's announcement and declaration then that he would shut the border.
Kevin, we need to hear from you on the president. He wasn't only talking about Saudi Arabia today, he was talking about the southern border, and it was pretty strong language.
Yes, President Trump tweeting earlier today that he's threatening to close the U.S. southern border if a caravan coming from Honduras of 4,000 migrants does not get stopped. This comes as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, fresh from his travels to the Middle East, is set to visit Central America to continue to talk about the issue of immigration. It also comes following the renegotiation of the USMCA or NAFTA 2.0, but tensions still very much strong, just with a little more than 2 weeks until the midterm elections. The president, according to the folks that I'm talking with, trying to activate the base on this border wall issue, but also to send a signal to the Senate. Of course, this comes as they have to renegotiate a budget deal and to keep the government funded, and the wall is very much going to be wrapped up in that. But this could present a crisis of sorts for this administration as it deals with Central and Latin America.
Yeah, well, so internal within the United States messages, what about what's being said to Mexico? The president, when I was waiting, in one of those tweets specifically say he cares more about border security than he does about the USMCA, that new deal with Canada and Mexico.
Absolutely. And there are two prongs to this entire development. The first is that the USMCA cannot get formally completed until next year. So this issue, the immigration issue, which is the second point that I would make, really can still pose significant policy risk to the forecast of all of that, because it then still technically is a bargaining chip of sorts. And it comes at a time in which Republicans, just ahead of the midterm elections, are really trying to anxiously craft some type of tough on immigration strategy to please their base.
There was a caravan famously on its way through Mexico from Central America toward the United States. And Trump said, no, we're not going to allow this. And he did everything that he thought he could do to prevent it, and was not totally successful, trying to work with Congress, which at the time was still controlled by the Republicans. And of course, afterward, in November, the Democrats stole an election, and now they have the majority. So, okay, now you're having even more trouble. So let's be clear about this. The Republican Party is only half a breath less progressive than the Democrats, because the border crisis is not something that popped up in the 2016 election. This has been going on since the Reagan years, when Reagan signed that ridiculous amnesty that turned a 3 million person problem into the 11, 12 plus million person problem that it is today. So they know this is a problem. They know what it is, and they had all levers of the legislative process. They had both houses of Congress and the presidency, and they did nothing. And the presidency was not where the sticking point was. Primarily, you had the Democrat in Republican clothing known as Paul Ryan, who would not deal with this issue in a way that protected the American people. Thank goodness he's no longer in Congress, but the damage is still done. So back then in October, you're saying, look, if we're not going to protect the people from what's coming across the border, we'll shut the border down. People think that wow. Nothing has changed. The border is still insecure. We now have a national emergency, people trying to fight the national emergency, and Trump is still determined to try to protect the American people where he can. The rhetoric stepped up more over this weekend as Mr. Trump said, you know what, we're probably going to shut it down next week. CBS News reported it in this manner on this past Friday.
The president today threatened drastic action if Mexico does not stop illegal immigration, and for the first time he put a date on it. The administration has repeatedly warned of a crisis at the southern border, with more than 268,000 apprehensions this year, more than 76,000 in February alone. That's an 11-year high. Many are families from Central America. Mola Lenghi is with the president in Florida.
So there's a very good likelihood that I'll be closing the border next week.
The president renewed his threat today to shut down the flow of people and goods across the southern border. He called on congressional Democrats to get tougher on immigration and demanded that Mexico stop undocumented immigrants from entering the U.S.
They're going to stop them. And if they don't stop them, we're closing the border. they'll close it. And we'll keep it closed for a long time. I'm not playing games.
The threat comes as the Department of Homeland Security says the number of undocumented immigrants in their custody is at a crisis level, with holding facilities overflowing, mostly with families and children. DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen wrote to Congress that we face a system-wide meltdown, and agents have been forced to begin releasing large numbers of aliens into the United States. She said her greatest concern is for the children, who are arriving sicker than ever before. There are at least 6,600 families in custody and approximately 4,700 children. In El Paso, Texas alone, 32,000 migrants have made their way into the city this year. That's up from 30,000 in all of 2017 and 18 combined. Customs and Border Patrol Chief Kevin McAleenan visited the city on Wednesday.
The increase in family units is a direct response to the vulnerabilities in our legal framework, where migrants and smugglers know that they will be released and allowed to stay in the U.S. indefinitely.
It's a big fat con job, folks.
At a campaign rally last night in Michigan, President Trump said those seeking asylum in the U.S. were not actually facing persecution at home, and he renewed a familiar call.
Walls work, folks. We need the wall.
Well, Democrats say it's the administration that's responsible for the crisis at the border through its failed policies of separating and incarcerating families and by focusing too narrowly on a wall instead of comprehensive immigration reform. Jeff?
Mullaney, thank you.
Okay. He said it again. He's put a date on it. He hasn't done that before. Oh, it's just threat. No, it's not that. It's the same reason why he didn't declare a national emergency before. He was looking at any way to do it so that everyone was participating, including Democrats in the House and Senate. However, the Democrats in the House and Senate are not interested in protecting the American people. Now, you can ask yourself the questions why that is, and there are enough Republicans to go with them to the point where a joint resolution opposing the National Emergency Declaration passed both houses, but not with a veto-proof majority, and it was vetoed by the president. Well, that was Friday. ABC News let people know as late as Sunday, it's not changing. He's still looking to close that border if he doesn't get Mexico's help in shutting things down, because he's not getting the help of the American government.
Next to the crisis at the border, President Trump now cutting hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid to 3 Central American countries. As he returns to Washington from Mar-a-Lago tonight, he said he would close the border with Mexico as soon as this week, and he's traveling there on Friday. But will he follow through on that threat, even if it hurts American businesses as well? ABC White House correspondent Tara Palmieri reporting from West Palm Beach tonight.
President Trump not backing down from his threat to close the southern border, cutting off hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Many migrants fleeing violence, corruption, and economic hardship in the 3 Central American countries now flooding the border.
We were paying them tremendous amounts of money, and we're not paying them anymore because they haven't done a thing for us.
For years, the U.S. has worked with El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras to address the root causes fueling the migration crisis. Just this week, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen announcing renewed cooperation effort with those countries. But now the administration saying they need to do more.
If not, it makes very little sense for us to continue to send them aid.
Congressional Democrats warn the president's approach is entirely counterproductive. Even the president's own border chief telling Tom last year it's essential to support the Central American governments.
How do we engage with those governments to support prosperity, governance, security, so that people don't feel compelled to leave their homes?
According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, 76,000 migrants were stopped at the border in February. March is on track to surpass those figures with an estimated 95,000 migrants. The president citing the growing number of illegal border crossings as the reason to shut down the border with Mexico.
We'll keep it closed for a long time. I'm not playing games.
But closing down ports could hurt the U.S. economy. An average of $1.7 billion in goods cross the border every day.
It shouldn't surprise anybody that we're turning to what some folks might think extreme measures. And we're supposed to fix this by changing the laws. Democrats won't do that, so we're looking at cutting off aid and closing the borders.
Tara Palmieri joins us now from West Palm Beach. And Tara, congressional Democrats already vowing to fight the president's decision to cut humanitarian aid.
Tom, Democrats say they will do everything in their power to push back. But 2 White House officials tell me they believe they're on solid ground. They say they don't need congressional approval to withhold funds. Tom?
The White House confident they can move forward. All right, Tara, thank you.
Let me talk about this laughable economic impact. $1.7 billion crosses the border every day. So we're talking $600 billion. That's a lot of money. The U.S. GDP is $21 trillion plus. $600 billion is not even 1%. It's a bigger deal for Mexico. Much bigger deal for Mexico. And therefore an incentive for them to do what you got to remember something. The United States economy is not dependent upon exporting goods. It's not. So if we decide to close the border with Mexico, the fact that Mexico can't get its goods in here is a much bigger problem than anything we would face. And the number of illegal crossings keeps growing. You have to understand, the people that are now sitting in Washington, D.C. would like to see the U.S. Constitution come down through a human flood of people with no allegiance to same. And Donald Trump is trying to prevent that. Let's not forget that for those who think Donald Trump is making an idle threat, do you guys remember what happened in December?
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay, absolutely.
And I am proud, and I'll tell you what,
I
am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it.
Well, was that a threat? Or did we not have the longest partial government shutdown in history when Donald Trump said, if you guys aren't going to play ball, then we'll shut it down. And the only reason it's open now is because the Democrats refused to pay the Coast Guard. And I believe Donald Trump, being concerned about federal workers, said we'd rather open the government and have them get paid than have them continue to work for nothing. It's not a threat. Donald Trump doesn't make threats. He makes announcements, and then he follows through if the conditions supporting that announcement are not addressed. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards, and after that we'll be back with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
So what's wrong with asking a legitimate question? The United States was founded because people asked legitimate questions. Thus, it is imperative that today Americans be allowed to ask legitimate questions. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, the recent suspension of Judge Jeanine Pirro by Fox Network for asking a legitimate question is befuddling. She, like millions of Americans, including those of us who have read the Quran, wonder if Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota is capable or willing to govern on behalf of American interests. After all, the Quran instructs Islamists to govern to increase Muslim influence, not to promote the interests of non-Muslim liberty-espousing republics. I find it ironic that some Iranian women rip their hijabs from their heads in defiance of oppressive Islamic law. Our leftist Congress changed a 181-year-old law to allow Muslim women to wear the hijab. The Friendly Muslim Brotherhood has a plan for world domination. And because Judge Pirro expressed concern about an elected official, she was labeled Islamophobic. So does that make CARE and Fox News Americaphobic? Because they freaked out after a TV talk show host expressed a bit of concern for our republic? I'm Ron Edwards.
Sponsored by David E. Garrett Jewelers.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. So, Obamacare is, again, unconstitutional. And now the Department of Justice agrees. And this is a bit of a change. And we're not talking about the Obama Department of Justice. We are talking about the Trump Department of Justice, which before seemed to say, well, you know, there are parts of Obamacare that we'd like to keep, etc., so on. All right. But that's not where they're going anymore, which I think is a good thing, by the way. Front Page Magazine says DOJ backs court ruling killing Obamacare. The Trump administration greenlights judicial repeal of the hated law. Now, of course, that's obviously a bit over on the right of center perspective. But Obamacare is not something that everybody loves. And the provisions of it that make it worth killing are not enjoyed by anyone who really works. But this whole idea that this is a big change for Obamacare is kind of funny. And also the whole idea that Obamacare has ever been anything other than unconstitutional is kind of strange. Now, in this article, it talks about the December 14th ruling that Judge Reed O'Connor in the Northern District of Texas, he held that in 2017, when Congress effectively repealed the mandate that forced Americans to buy health insurance, well, then there was no longer any constitutional leg upon which Obamacare would stand. But if you want to think this goes back just to December of 2018, maybe not. Back in June of 2018, we had this from CNBC.
To the Justice Department under President Trump saying certain key provisions of Obamacare are unconstitutional. Bertha Coombs is live at the NASDAQ with the latest. Bertha.
Melissa, the Trump administration says it will not defend Obamacare against a Texas lawsuit seeking to invalidate the law. The DOJ siding with Texas, arguing that the repeal of the individual mandate means the Affordable Care Act's insurance plan requirements, protections against pre-existing conditions, and other things are now unconstitutional. Attorney General Jeff Sessions saying in a letter to Congress, the department in the past has declined to defend a statute in cases in which the president has concluded that the statute is unconstitutional and should not be defended, and
That is the case here. Now, 16 state Democratic attorneys general are fighting the other side of the case, so any ruling here is likely going to be appealed to a higher court. Well, it may not be a near-term threat. It just adds another layer of uncertainty as insurers are submitting 2019 rate requests right now. We've already seen a number of double-digit requests for increases from 12% in Oregon and Washington to 36% in Maryland, pricing in the loss of the individual mandate. Centene and Anthem, two of the biggest exchange players today, under a bit of pressure. They're now flat. They've come back from the lows of the session. Guys, and the insurance industry, health insurance industry, says they are going to put in an amicus brief on the other side of this case.
I'm just wondering what the political blowback of all this is going to be, Berth. I mean, even Republicans who have been against Obamacare have sought to protect those with pre-existing conditions, the people who need it the most, correct?
It's certainly going to be a big political football. The argument here is that the states individually should be able to decide which parts of the law or what types of law they should have, that it shouldn't be a federal mandate. But nonetheless, you've got to think taxes and Obamacare once again are going to be, front and center as we head towards the midterms.
That was June of 2018, well ahead of the midterms. Interesting things there. The idea that any part of Obamacare was constitutional doesn't make a lot of sense. But then if you really want to oppose it, you have to sit there and put it on the same level as Medicare, which obviously is considered constitutional, but is also, for all intents and purposes, bankrupt and has been for decades. The unfunded liabilities associated with Medicare, if I remember correctly, they dwarf those associated with the national debt. We have more unfunded liabilities under Medicare, and if you add in Social Security, it gets even worse than all of the debt that is associated with the federal government, actually several times the debt associated with the federal government, and it keeps growing. But the idea that health care is some type of right, and let's be clear about something. Let's stop calling it health care, because that's not what we're talking about. We're only talking about who's paying for it. We're only talking about health insurance. Health care is provided in this country, arguably better than anywhere else. But forcing people to pay for someone else's health insurance, that's what kind of puts Americans in a bad way. And of course, they talked about the lawsuit back in June 2018, and there was the decision in December of that year.
The first thing people should know is that the White House says current enrollment won't be affected by this ruling. That said, this decision is a political victory for Republicans who have opposed the Affordable Care Act from the very beginning. And as you mentioned, it sets in motion yet another legal battle over Obamacare while throwing into limbo the health coverage for millions of Americans. This morning, Obamacare back in the crosshairs after a federal judge in Texas ruled the Affordable Care Act unconstitutional late Friday. President Trump hailing it as great news for America. The decision threatens health care coverage for some 20 million Americans and sets up a new legal showdown over former President Barack Obama's signature achievement.
Health care in America is a privilege, not for the few, but a right for everybody.
In the ruling, U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor agreed with a group of 20 Republican-led states that it's unconstitutional to mandate people buy health insurance and tax those who don't comply. The Democratic response was swift. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi saying the ruling exposes the monstrous endgame of Republicans' all-out assault on people with pre-existing conditions and Americans' access to affordable health care. The top Senate Democrat, Chuck Schumer, saying the ruling seems to be based on faulty legal reasoning, and hopefully it will be overturned. The judge said last year's Republican tax cut bill knocked the constitutional foundation from under Obamacare by eliminating a penalty for not having coverage. If the ruling is upheld, it could roll back Obamacare protections for people with pre-existing medical conditions. President Trump on Friday called on Congress to pass new health care legislation, something not likely to happen as Democrats take control of the House next month. The White House says the Affordable Care Act will remain in place for now, while the new ruling is appealed.
Well, first of all, by the way, the appeal of the December 2018 ruling will fail. It's going to fail. Obamacare is unconstitutional. It's dead. It's already been declared that, and that law can no longer be enforced. So here is your dilemma if you're a Democrat or someone who's in favor of socialized medicine. You need another plan because Obamacare is not going to stand. It's just not. Now, not surprisingly, the Trump administration is now, through its Justice Department, well, it's opposing Obamacare. Of course it is. Why wouldn't it? Maybe you forgot the campaign, but okay, for those who did, I understand. And going along with this report that I was reading, CBS talked about the Department of Justice's position with respect to Obamacare in this regard.
Well, the Trump administration failed to get Congress to throw out Obamacare, and now it's turning to the courts. In legal papers filed yesterday, the Justice Department argues for the first time that the entire Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional. Paula Reed is to the White House with a big shift that could put millions of Americans' health coverage at risk. Paula, good morning.
Good morning. A big shift indeed, and a move to try to deliver on a signature Trump campaign promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. The Trump Justice Department now says that it agrees with a lower court ruling out of Texas that declared all of Obamacare invalid. That December ruling came a year after the GOP's tax bill repealed Obamacare's tax penalty for people who are uninsured. The Texas judge ruled the provision was so central to the law that it just couldn't stand without it. And at the time, the Trump administration argued that some parts of Obamacare would stand, including an expansion of Medicaid. In a statement yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the Trump administration is declaring a, quote, all-out war on the health care of the American people. The White House has said it does expect this case could reach the Supreme Court, which has upheld Obamacare twice. John?
Paula, thank you. A very important story.
To say that this is the first time that Obamacare in its entirety has been declared unconstitutional is a bald-faced fake news lie. It's not true. Every time it's been declared unconstitutional, it's been declared unconstitutional more than once. It has always been the entire law is unconstitutional. This goes back to the way the law was constructed. Often, more often than not, when Congress puts together legislation, they make the different provisions of the law severable, meaning that you can declare some parts of it non-workable, but the rest of the law would stand. They didn't do that with Obamacare. With particular, the individual mandate, they didn't make it severable so that the other parts of Obamacare would go forward. It's if you don't have the mandate, everything goes. That's not a trick. That's the way the Democrat Party, and I'm going to say the Democrat Party because remember, not one member of the Republican Party, not one Republican in Washington, D.C. voted for Obamacare. Not one. So the way the Democrats wrote Obamacare was that it's an all or nothing deal. Either we force everybody to pay for health insurance or you can't do it. And the only reason it was declared constitutional was because John Roberts decided to rewrite it from the bench, calling the mandate a tax, which is something the Democrat Party refused to do, pointedly refused to do, and argued loudly that it was not a tax. But John Roberts said because it's a tax, the 16th Amendment allows Congress to do whatever they want, and therefore this foolishness is constitutional. But again, before John Roberts took up legislation, in March of 2012, people seem to be forgetting this.
Well, it's time for this morning's mover and shaker. It is federal judge Roger Vinson. He is a former Navy pilot, and he just moved the battle over President Obama's health care reform law one step closer to the Supreme Court. Vinson ruled yesterday that it was unconstitutional for Congress to require Americans to obtain health insurance. Another federal judge has issued a similar ruling. But Vinson, he took it a step further. He said the insurance requirement was bound to the rest of the law, and thus the whole thing must be declared void. Vinson is an Annapolis graduate. He spent 6 years as a Navy pilot. In 1983, President Reagan appointed him to the federal court in Pensacola, Florida. That is the place where he earned his pilot's wings. Now Vinson is what's called senior status. In other words, he's semi-retired. So far, 2 judges appointed by Republicans have rejected all or part of the health care law. 2 appointed by Democrats have upheld it. The issue is expected to end up in the nation's highest court, the Supreme Court.
By March of 2012, you had 2 rulings, minimum of 2 rulings, that Obamacare was unconstitutional. Both of them held that the individual mandate was unconstitutional. One of them held, as did the ruling this past December, that, I'm sorry, this individual mandate, because of the way you wrote the law, if it goes, there is no law. Obamacare is a dead issue. I'm sorry. This is really what's amazing to me. How do we not understand that Obamacare is dead? It's unconstitutional. When the individual mandate was declared unconstitutional, that voids the law. When John Roberts decided to call the individual mandate a tax, that of course revived the law. When Congress removed the individual mandate from the law, zeroing it out, a tax of 0 is no tax. And therefore trying to compel Americans to buy something and not tax them is unconstitutional. Obamacare is dead. People don't want to believe it. Well, he couldn't get Congress to do it. You don't get it. Donald Trump doesn't care about Congress doing it. He cares about getting it done. Let me ask you a question. Is it any less repealed if the law is declared unconstitutional, or if Congress decides to replace it with a law and therefore take down Obamacare? What's the net effect to Obamacare? If it's unconstitutional, it's void. If it's replaced by another law, it's also void. There's no difference. Donald Trump said, you know what, let's remind people of what he said.
We're going to be submitting, as soon as our secretary is approved, almost simultaneously, shortly thereafter, a plan. It'll be repeal and replace. It will be essentially simultaneously. It will be various segments, you understand, but will most likely be on the same day or the same week, but probably the same day, could be the same hour. So we're going to do repeal and replace. Very complicated stuff. And we're going to get a health bill passed. We're going to get health care taken care of in this country. You have deductibles that are so high that after people go broke paying their premiums, which are going through the roof, the health care can't even be used by them because the deductibles are so high. Obamacare is the Democrats' problem. We are going to take the problem off the shelves for them. We're doing them a tremendous service by doing it. We could sit back and let them hang with it. We are doing the Democrats a great service. So as soon as our secretary is approved and gets into the office, we'll be filing a plan. And it was actually pretty accurately reported today, the New York Times. And the plan will be repeal and replace Obamacare. We're going to have a health care that is far less expensive and far better.
Donald Trump always said that Obamacare had to go. I'm sorry. He always said that. Now, the fact that Donald Trump is, in my mind, still a traditional liberal, he's not a progressive per se, but he's a traditional liberal. He loves the idea of the government stepping in and impacting health care. He's not against that, but he's always been against Obamacare. So for the Trump Department of Justice to say, oh, we got a court ruling that's going to get rid of Obamacare for us, great, we'll take it, because they want a different law. I don't understand why people think this is a big deal. Donald Trump has always said Obamacare is bad. People are saying, oh, they're worried about the double-digit increases. I said, you had double-digit, you had in some cases triple-digit increases under Obamacare. Obamacare was out to wreck individual health insurance in this country. That's what it's about. It's about getting rid of private health insurance. That's its goal, because once you do that, you force everybody into this Medicare for all type foolishness, and you bankrupt the country the same way Medicare is bankrupt. Medicare has no money. To do Medicare for all means we're going to take that no money situation and peanut butter spread it around the whole population. Bad idea. Can Trump, under his plan, come up with something that is better? In my opinion, no, because you do not need the federal government involved in health care. You can't demonstrate how it's made things better. Definitely cannot explain how it makes it cost effective. And if it's not cost effective, it's not even health care. It's pretty simple, guys. What was unconstitutional is unconstitutional, and despite a brief nonsensical ruling that made it appear constitutional, well, it's now back to where it was. And now Donald Trump has to deliver on a promise. The problem is he's not going to be able to deliver on that promise as long as there are Democrats in the majority in either house of Congress. Stay tuned. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. I didn't mention it at the start of this hour, but this hour is really focusing on where the courts are actually seeming to come back to the position that the American people have on different high-profile issues. Obamacare is unconstitutional. That has not been an unpopular position among the American people for quite some time. That is what they think. And you do not see outrage in the streets because Obamacare was declared unconstitutional. Because it is. To force people to buy something in order for you to enact your agenda? Wow. So the courts have basically said, nope, can't do that. And to be fair, with the exception of the Supreme Court, with John Roberts' interesting ruling, I hate to tell you this, but it's always been unconstitutional, consistently unconstitutional. But that is last segment. In this segment, let's talk a little bit more about California, the place where I live, and the birthplace, it seems, of increasingly unconstitutional and anti-American ideas. Back in 2016, there was a proposition, I believe it was Proposition 63, where Californians, via proposition, passed an ammo ban, a gun control measure backed by Governor, well, then he was not governor, but now Governor Gavin Newsom. Of course, the way things are worded has everything to do with it. It's like, well, we're going to put it in this way in the proposition, but of course the language that actually gets implemented is something different. Gullible as California voters are, and they went for the okie doke and passed this ban that was supposedly going to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. No such thing. When it came up and went into effect, let's just face it, both sides had their own propaganda mills. And those who were opposed to what California did went out and found a mascot, so to speak, to demonstrate that what they wanted was not wholesale killing of people, and they made her the face of opposing this law. So back in May, this report ran, May of 2018, this report ran on Fox News about the opposition, the legal opposition to California's ammo ban.
The National Rifle Association announcing a new lawsuit against the state of California, but this time they've got a high-profile ally, Olympic shooter Kim Rhode. Trace Gallagher brings us the story from Los Angeles tonight. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Shannon, this is all part of Proposition 63, which was passed by California voters in 2016. The law, among other things, bans large-capacity magazines and requires ammunition purchases to be made face-to-face. In other words, you can't buy it online or across state lines. The NRA and the California Rifle and Pistol Association call it unprecedented and an overreach, saying California gun owners are tired of being treated like criminals. Watch.
What I don't understand is why I need one permit to buy a firearm and another permit to buy ammunition. I just worry that the state is going to keep going to the point where they try to make it inconvenient to just buy a gun.
California Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, who's running for governor, says the law was written on solid ground, and he's vowing to fight the NRA, which Newsom says is putting profits over lives. This all comes amid the national debate over gun control in the wake of the shooting in Parkland, Florida. Fred Gutenberg, the father of a Parkland shooting victim, tweeted, quoting, "This is why I say the NRA is the problem. The citizens of California voted, and now the NRA is suing to overturn the will of the people. They must be defeated." But pro-gun advocates are pushing back. Quote, "The truth is that no amount of gun control will ever satisfy anti-gun extremists in the California legislature. They're seeking to set a standard for the rest of the country and must be defeated." Meantime, students who are frustrated with the message that all young people oppose the Second Amendment are planning their own school walkout tomorrow called the Stand for the Second. The protest was pioneered by 18-year-old Will Riley, a non-gun-owning senior in Carlsbad, New Mexico, who says his generation is being generalized and that, quote, "I think we have an obligation to define ourselves." So far, students in 300 schools from 42 states plan to join the 16-minute walkout, again recognizing each student who was murdered at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High. This walkout is well short of the 2,000 schools involved in the national school walkout back on March 14th, but it is significant nonetheless. Shannon.
All right, Trace, we'll be watching that. We know you will as well. Thank you.
Yep.
More now on this lawsuit challenging Prop 63 in California. It was approved by more than 60% of voters there in 2016. Well, Kim Rhode is a six-time Olympic medalist who's at the center of a new lawsuit over the state's so-called bullet control laws. She's one of several plaintiffs challenging the law. Kim, welcome. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And by the way, folks, she just got back from South Korea where she broke her own world record. And so even with jet lag and everything else, she's joining us tonight to talk about this. And I heard a little bit about the fact that you may go through 500 to 1,000 rounds a day. This for you comes down to being able to get the ammunition you need to be able to practice and train for these competitions. So how does the law impact your ability to do that?
Well, the law impacts me in a very major way. A great example is, like you said, I shoot 500 to 1,000 rounds a day, 7 days a week, and the ammunition that I'm required to shoot in my sport is very specialized. It's not something that I can buy at any of the ranges that I train at. That's provided to me from the Olympic Training Center or USA Shooting, in my case. They would either mail it to me or give it to me at a shoot, at which point I would drive it across state lines, and both of those are now deemed illegal under Prop 63. 2023. So I have a major problem of trying to obtain the ammo that I need to be able to practice and compete at the level that is required to bring home those gold medals for the United States.
Well, I want to read something that the lieutenant governor there, Gavin Newsom, had to say about these challenges. He says, by the way, he's running for governor. We wrote Proposition 63 on solid legal ground. Later on, going on to say, California voters said loudly and clearly that guns and ammunition do not belong in the hands of dangerous individuals. But once again, the NRA has prioritized gun industry profits over the lives of law-abiding Californians. I'm guessing you would describe yourself as law-abiding.
I'm a law-abiding, non-dangerous person. I don't have any criminal record. It's just something that I've enjoyed my entire life. I started actually when I was very young. I actually competed all through high school, earning letters and actually varsity lettered for 4 years in high school here in California. And I've been able to compete for the last 6 Olympics, and I hope to compete for many more. But unfortunately, with these laws, I'm going to be having even more of a difficulty after 2019 of even being able to obtain my ammunition to maintain that level that I'm at and compete against some of the best in the world. And it's not just me. I know I'm on the extreme end because I shoot so much, but just every competitor out there. This is affecting just the everyday Joe Blow that goes out and wants to shoot. It is very, very restrictive, and in my case, I can't even get my ammo.
Well, our hat is off to you, no matter where folks stand on this gun control, gun rights issue. The fact that you've represented the U.S. so well time and time again, and we'll follow the case and see what resolution you ultimately get. Kim Brody, thanks for time.
Oh, no problem. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me.
All right, come back soon.
And my apologies. That was a bit of a long clip. I don't like to normally play ones that are that long, but I felt it was significant. Well, they followed that case, and on Friday, apparently, Friday the 29th of March, we did get a result. Judge strikes down California gun control law that Governor Gavin Newsom championed. A judge in Southern California struck down a California gun control law Friday that Gavin Newsom championed 3 years ago, ruling that the ban on high-capacity magazines is unconstitutional. In response to a few madmen with guns and ammunition, California law turns millions of responsible, law-abiding people trying to protect themselves into criminals. U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez wrote in his decision on Duncan versus Becerra. Individual liberty and freedom are not outmoded concepts, Benitez wrote. Stop right there. Individual liberty and freedom are not outmoded concepts. Because people who are in government do not like the way you exercise your individual liberty and use your freedom does not mean they can take either away. That's the long and the short of it. Well, what about all these people who are getting shot? Hammers kill more people than guns. Automobiles kill thousands more people than guns. And if I remember correctly, more than 60% of gun homicides in the United States are suicides. Are you really trying to tell me that if someone wants to kill themselves and you take all the guns away, that all these people would be alive? Really? Paul Simon had a song that said there must be 50 ways to leave your lover. There must be at least as many ways to off yourself if that's what you want to do. And I understand the pain associated with it. I have a very good friend whose daughter, unfortunately, took her own life using a relative's gun. It's terrible. That said, what's that got to do with everybody else? Nothing. Voters passed this ban back in 2016. It was called Proposition 63, and it outlawed possession of magazines holding more than 10 rounds. The law has not yet been enforced because of legal challenges. And of course, because the voters passed it, you have the gun control enthusiasts saying, you're trying to overthrow the will of the people. Well, I don't remember you saying that when the voters of California twice outlawed same-sex marriage. I don't recall the same people who are crying about folks pushing on gun control because doing so violates the people's will. I don't remember you standing up and saying same-sex marriage should not be fought for because it violates the people's will. The people of California twice said no to same-sex marriage. Twice said no. But it is going on in California anyway. So I'm not trying to hear that argument. The initiative also included background checks for ammunition purchases, reporting requirements for lost firearms, and new legal procedures for confiscating guns from those prohibited from owning them. You might remember in the clip, a gentleman brought up the point, you have to have one permit to have a gun and then a separate permit to get ammunition for the gun. Really? I thought keeping and bearing the right to keep and bear arms was, I understood, something that the Constitution, truly supported. Permit for a gun and then a separate permit just to buy ammunition. Can I ask you a question? What good is a gun without ammunition? Let me bring up that point. In his decision, Judge Benitez detailed several accounts of people defending themselves against home invasions who ran out of ammunition while shooting at intruders. He implied they could have benefited from high-capacity magazines. Not surprisingly, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, criticized the ruling. The district court judge's failure to uphold a ban on high-capacity magazines is indefensible, dangerous for our communities, and contradicts well-established case law. Our commitment to public safety and defending common-sense gun safety laws remains steadfast. Really, in a sanctuary state where you do not hold illegal aliens who commit criminal acts accountable, your commitment to public safety remains steadfast? Seriously? Man, you know what? I may not have been born at night. It wasn't last night. I'm sorry. This is the beginning of a police state. When only the government can have guns and ammunition, you live in a police state. You no longer have control. You no longer have freedom. You no longer have individual liberty. And just because you try to call it common sense gun laws doesn't change what they are and what you're doing. The NRA cheered the ruling, not surprisingly, saying Benitez handed Second Amendment supporters a sweeping victory. In a statement, the group said the decision leaves law-abiding Californians safer and freer, at least for the time being. Let me help you out. It is interesting that the courts are taking the side of individual freedom, individual liberty, and taking sides against progressive attacks on sane. It's interesting. It is also odd that it has to be dealt with in the courts when the Constitution is clear that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How are you going to tell somebody that you're not infringing upon their right to keep and bear arms if you don't allow them to have ammunition to fire? The purpose of having a gun is to fire ammunition at targets of the owner's choice. To deny someone bullets is no different than denying them a gun. unless you want them to bludgeon people with guns, pistol whip everybody. So yes, this was an attack on the Second Amendment. You could only have 10 bullets. What is it? Everybody's Barney Fife? Get one bullet, put it in your pocket? Only pull it out in emergencies? The court made the right decision. The problem is that the people are so gullible now that something like this even got on a ballot, even if it was a proposition, that something like this was passed, and that the courts, not the people, had to stand up for individual liberty and freedom. I'm thankful the courts did the right thing. I'm horrified that the people did not. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show, and I'm going to continue with this theme of it looks like the courts are moving back toward the American people. Unconstitutional Obamacare, attacks on the Second Amendment being rebuffed, and now this story where doing time in prison for a crime committed in America doesn't absolve you of immigration detention if you're an illegal alien, which I think is the right thing. Fox Business Channel weighed in on this back on March 19th, but I don't think they treated it the way that they should have. But let me go ahead and play what they had to say regarding it.
General, first to the Supreme Court decision. What is your take on that? Will it stop criminal illegals from coming?
Well, it's great to be with you. I think it's exactly the right decision. We should be able to hold these illegal aliens that are criminals until we deport them. You know, as a soldier who has fought overseas, it's rather disheartening to see the undercurrent of liberalism here that's trying to undermine our national security. And so this is a win for the president, it's a win for the country, it's a win for our national security, because these ill-intended individuals need to be back where they came from.
You know, General, 400 people apprehended in 5 minutes in El Paso, Texas, trying to cross. Your take on that?
Well, my hat's off to the law enforcement and officials that executed that apprehension and that were able to prevent that surge of illegal immigrants coming across the border. It goes to highlight the problem that we face, and you know, it is every day on the border. These border agents are facing maybe not 400, but something on the scale from 50 to 400 trying to get across the border. So it's a problem, and it's a national emergency, as the president says, and he needs that money to finish building the wall so we can funnel the illegal immigrants into the stations where they're supposed to be crossing.
Yeah, the Pentagon has given Congress a list of construction projects, including dozens in California. California Governor Gavin Newsom won't be happy about that. Where do you see that heading?
Well, yeah, I think it's fair. The president increased the military budget by billions and billions of dollars, and so it's fair for him to be able to look at that and say, let's take $4 to $8 billion from the construction budget, and here's the list. The secretary was asked to provide the list to Congress of what might be impacted, and so everybody's getting a look to see that because they didn't give the president the money, some of it might be coming out of their home districts, and so voters might not be too happy about that in the long run for these congressmen that lose projects in their district. But at the end of the day, it's the right call for the president.
General, great to see you. Thanks for coming in. Come back soon.
So let's talk in reverse on this. He brought up the national emergency declaration whereby the president is going to take money out of the defense budget for the wall after he's increased the defense budget by billions, maybe tens of billions of dollars. So now he's going to take a portion of his increase and put it into protecting the southern border. And this is a problem. No, it's not. It is the right thing to do when Congress has decided that the people of the United States are not worth protecting. And that is what they've decided. Their idea of no, no, no to a wall and yes, yes, yes to nothing else. Conversation doesn't protect people. A wall would, or all the concrete action. We need technology, we need barriers, we need boots, we need this. And they acted upon nothing regarding that either. So what do you want people to do? As they say, money talks and everything else walks. But back up to the first part of this, there was a Supreme Court decision that came out on March 19th. And the Supreme Court ruled that the government can detain immigrants with past criminal records even after they have completed prison terms. It was a 5-4 ruling. Why am I not surprised? Thank goodness Trump is president. Otherwise, it would have gone the other way. The 5-4 decision, led by the court's conservatives and dissented by its liberal wing, it reverses a determination by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, the nutty Ninth again, which stated that migrants can only be put in immigration detention within 24 hours of their release from criminal custody, as opposed to months or even years later. Think about that for a minute. You've broken the law, you served time, and you happen to have been an illegal immigrant at the time you broke the law, and you're still one. The Ninth Circuit says that unless they come for you for immigration violations within 24 hours of you getting out of prison, you can't be detained. That was reversed. The lead plaintiff in the case, a Cambodian refugee named Moni Preep, was a legal permanent resident with 2 drug convictions. He was detained, faced possible removal proceedings in 2013, years after being released from criminal custody. The conservative justices argued, now let's stop there for a minute. Well, you said he was illegal. No, he wasn't illegal. I'm corrected. He was legal. But your legal resident status is not citizenship. You can't come to this country, have legal status as a non-citizen, commit a bunch of crimes, and think the U.S. cannot kick you out. So, the conservative justices argued that the earlier ruling spares terrorist aliens from the rigors of mandatory detention and would be gentler on terrorists than it is on garden variety offenders. Justice Samuel Alito said the fact that the alien must be arrested on the day he walks out of jail is especially hard to swallow. What you want the government to do is to track everybody who's in jail who happens to have been in violation of immigration law, and the moment they walk out of jail effectively, or within 24 hours, if you're going to do anything regarding their violation of immigration law, you have to get them within the first 24 hours, otherwise you can't detain them. Wow, why don't we apply that to some other crimes that people commit? You know what? What if we did that to folks who committed murder? Just throw out the statute of limitations, and if we don't get you immediately, this is crazy. The deadline that the Ninth Circuit sought to put in place is going to be missed for various reasons beyond the federal government's control. I mean, what if the guy just happens to leave the jurisdiction for 24 hours and you don't know where he went and you can't get him until he comes back? The whole idea of the ruling was to ensure Homeland Security officials would not be constrained in their duties to protect the homeland. Now, for the other side, Justice Stephen Breyer asserted the ruling could prevent bail hearings for immigrants with even minor criminal records. Wait a minute. Why are you, as a non-citizen, committing any crime in the United States? I'm sorry. You should not be committing any crimes. That's just the way it is. I mean, I mean, maybe you forgot that one of the Ball brothers, Lonzo Ball, played for the Los Angeles Lakers. His brother, who was a freshman at UCLA, went to China and was caught shoplifting. He didn't get a bail hearing. As a matter of fact, if Donald Trump had not intervened with the president of China, he might still be in China and probably in jail. He wasn't. I mean, he was in the country legally. He was in China legally. But you don't go someplace else and commit crimes. This is just common sense, guys. It really is. If you have the benefit of being in the United States or any country, obey its laws. Otherwise, if they have to punish you for that, they have every right to kick you out of the country as well. To say otherwise is to imply that you don't have a country, and that you will not protect its citizens, and that you value those from other places with no allegiance to your country above those who are citizens. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you. Continue to fight for the things that matter. And until next week, do take care.
Listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.